G'day and welcome to the Raw Rugby podcast. The test season is heating up. Joe Schmidt has announced his 38-man Wallabies squad. Tony Harper and I broke that down last week, but coming up, we'll be talking to Matt Toomua to get his 2 cents on that. Plenty doing across the world. Super Rugby wrapped up. The Blues are champions for the first time in 21 years. An All Blacks squad, Razor Robertson's first squad, announced 32-person squad, which significantly 6 people less than Joe Schmidt's squad. So that's really interesting. But also up north, French top 14 final around the corner, Toulouse to host Bordeaux, and a very familiar side to Matt Toomua, Leicester without a head coach after Dan McKellar no longer. We'll break all of that down on the other side of this. Matty, welcome back to Canberra. A bit of a road trip exercise for you over the last couple of days. Talk us through what you've been doing.
A bit of a road trip, yep. So shipped my car over from Japan, much cheaper over there. So I didn't fancy buying one in Australia with all our taxes and stuff. So shipped it over and had to fly down to Melbourne yesterday. Had a quick coffee with a couple of golf mates and then jumped on the road and 7 hours back here. So all good. Had about 5 Suntory ice long blacks on the way there. And by the time I got home, I actually couldn't sleep for a few hours. So we're running on empty, but we're all good.
You do realise you're not in Japan anymore, mate. There's coffee outside of Suntory.
Well, there's not, because Japanese companies basically own everything beverage-wise. So there was one All Press. So All Press is a Kiwi company, but run in Melbourne. But they've actually been bought out by Asahi. So, but no one knows. So it's all, you wouldn't know, but the Japanese are taking over, mate. They're taking over.
What kind of wheels have you brought back with you? Like a Toyota or what are we talking? A family man now you are?
I am a family man. It's a Mazda CX-5. It is like an absolute ripper of a car. I love it. I'm thinking of adding the roof racks to it so I can put my bike on it. The pram and golf clubs. So yeah, no, it's a bit different than the old Range Rover that I used to have when I was playing. But you move on.
You probably would have got one of those. Who would have got one of those from the old Wallaby days? Dave Pocock, Michael Hooper, Israel Folau, anyone else?
Yeah, well, Brumbies actually had a thing with Land Rover for a while, so we got a few then as well, which was pretty cool. But mate, unfortunately, I tried to give them a call and they didn't recognise the name, and I didn't get a call back, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But short memories, mate.
yeah, it's very. Very quickly you're a forgotten kind of person. You know, you're just part of the general working class now. So I expect you to behind the coffee grinder tomorrow. Look, we could continue talking about that, or we could move on to something else, perhaps more pressing. That's a 38-person Wallabies squad that Joe Schmidt announced last Friday. What was your initial reaction to it?
I'm torn, Christy. I'm torn. No real surprises, I guess. 38 out of 5 teams, and I think for me, look, I'm really excited to see a couple of youngsters in there, that's for sure. Particularly a couple in the locks. Darcy missing out is probably notable. I'm really happy to see the Rebels 12 there, David Feluai. I actually think he probably had a better season last season, but I think he's got something that maybe a few other guys don't. And I think the Kiwi coaches really enjoy that abrasive kind of 12 rather than the ball playing 12. So he could fit in there. I'm a little bit torn, to be honest. I don't know if it's the right thing to leave out our international players. I really don't.
Yeah, well, I wrote a column for Monday morning, and it's got a pretty good reaction in terms of it's been well read. Has it been met with agreement? I would say it's probably more 60% against what I've said, which I actually think it's one of the weaker squads in memory. And I've said that for a few reasons. One, obviously, we've come off the back of a bad World Cup, but there was a few internationals in there. Unfortunately, they got injured, or Will Skelton got injured at the wrong time, and Tananella Tupou got injured at the wrong time. We could go on and on, but you've not just excluded the internationals, you've also excluded everyone heading overseas, which includes now Isaac Rodder, Jordan Walisi, Isaiah Parisi, Ned Hannigan, Lockie Swinton. That's half a dozen names already.
Yeah.
But then the NRL defectors in Mark Knowling and Iwasi and Carter Gordon. I don't know if Australian rugby at the moment has effectively then 50 international players ready to step into the test arena, given the fact that we haven't had a Super Rugby side make the finals since 2014. We haven't had a side other than the Brumbies make the Super Rugby semi-finals for several years. It seems like, yes, it's admirable that Joe Schmidt's got a pretty hardline stance around not picking anyone who's not going to be here in 2025. But Phil Ward's been talking about for the last year, particularly 9 months, we've got to get back to winning the next game rather than looking ahead to a year's time.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I said last week that, we need to invest in guys like Tom Wright and Noah, and think of, 15 games. That being said, I didn't mean that for the whole squad. I probably meant more these kind of guys who've got these X factor, who have played, and I think we need that. I just don't know if we're not New Zealand. We are not New Zealand. We can have this hardline stance, great, and it looks great on paper, but we don't. That's not how guys leave to league. If we say to them, oh, we're gonna, they'll just go, all right, see you later. I don't know if coming off the back of a World Cup where we didn't make it out of the pools against two of the teams that were playing in our first few tests, Georgia and Wales. Sure, we beat Georgia, but we got flogged by Wales, and then we're not picking our best team ultimately. And I don't know if that I don't know if that's the correct thing. I hope I'm proven wrong, but I really don't know if that's the right thing to be doing. If France were coming down here, if England were coming down here, if Ireland were coming down here, are we picking our strongest team? And if that's the case, then are we saying that Wales is an easier game, even though we, last performance we got flogged by them? I really want to support Joe, and I really hope he's got it right here. I really hope he knows a lot more than me, which I'm certain he does. I don't know if we have that luxury to be leaving guys like Marika, Will Skelton, all these guys out.
Yeah, I think he's made it harder on himself. And a very winnable game against Wales became a bit harder just then. Warren Gatlin's only announced, I think, 3 uncapped players in his side. So despite the fact that Wales have gone through the ringer over the last 18 months themselves, I think they've only won one game in the Six Nations in 2 years. They lost to Italy. They've struggled in the biggest tournament in the Northern Hemisphere for some time. Their domestic sides have really struggled in the United Rugby Championship, but they still have had 5 games in the Six Nations, and they've just played a South African side, and they got touched up, but they're going to come here with a lot more continuity and understanding of how they're going to play than a Joe Schmidt side, which is going to have effectively about 10 days and probably 6 or 7 training sessions to try to get up to speed with what Joe Schmidt wants. So, look, you've got to win these games, particularly in Sydney. Sydney's been a curse for Australian rugby for so long. You don't want to make this a toss of a coin, flip of a coin kind of situation. I feel like Joe Schmidt, I reckon, will bring in a couple of foreigners for those for the Rugby Championship. I just would have probably gone to Marika Korobetti, and I probably would have had guys like Eddie Hannigan, Lockie Swinton, Scott Seo. I would have just been sprinkling a little bit more experience and test hardness before maybe farewelling those guys that are going to head to France and offshore because they're just must-win games.
Yeah, and I've said this earlier. I would love to interview Peter Horn about this, because there's no way Joe Schmidt is saying, I don't want these guys. I don't want these guys. Like, his job is to coach. His job is to coach with the team he's got. And I believe that it's Phil Waugh, it's Peter Horn who have set, a few boundaries over that. I just can't see a coach who's whose success rate is purely determined on wins, saying, I don't need these guys. I don't think that's the case. And I would love us to actually interview Peter Horn. I'd love him to come out and mention it. And I'm sure Joe's not going to throw him under the bus, but there needs to be a separation between coaching and selection. Coaching and selection are not the same. There are different people involved. And yeah, I worry. I really do worry. If you look at this and look, if we win these games against Wales and Georgia, great, well done, tick. If we lose, which we could easily lose, 2 out of the 3 or one out of the 3, you then go into a rugby championship where I don't think I've been less confident about a rugby championship in a long time. Like, I just think that the Kiwis are firing. I think the South Africans might be at their peak. Argentina know how to win tight games. Even with our top side, like if we don't win these first couple of games, I think it's going to be a really tough rugby championship. And then come August, September, we're 1 out of 8 or whatever it is. Like it gets really tricky from then.
Well, I've got to say that even 2 months ago or a month ago, before I had a bit of an idea around what the squad might look like, I thought these were 3 very winnable games. And if you're 3 from 3, that's a great start heading into a rugby championship where South Africa are touring Australia. And we know that the Springboks in Australia are nowhere near the same proposition as what they are at home in South Africa. So, historically, Australia wins at, I think, more than 70% against South Africa on Australian soil. If you can win one of those 2, you go to Argentina, who have got a brand new coach, a first-year head coach in Contaponi. That's given all the Argentinians off the back of a big World Cup campaign, a very long, arduous season in either the Premiership or the top 14, bringing them all together, not having that same cohesion as Michael Cheika, perhaps trying to look ahead as well, a bit of a regeneration. I thought that they were games that you could definitely target as well leading into a Bledisloe Cup. But you're right, so important to start well. What did you make of a 38-person squad? Because it's quite a big one. 21 forwards, 17 backs, 12 uncapped, and then there's also Alex Hodgman. I don't know why we're saying there's 13 uncapped players, because Alex Hodgman's played for the All Blacks. He's not uncapped at Test level. It's just it's strange to me, but. It's 6 people more than the All Blacks.
Yeah.
What do you think that says in terms of the planning and everything else? That there's a massive difference in squad sizes.
Yeah. I think just before I comment on that, I think to your point, South Africa at home, Argentina away, like games that are not out of our reach. However, you need momentum. And I think we build that momentum through wins in the first 3. And, like I said, I really hope I'm wrong here. I really hope we get 3 wins and then we get another lift of injection from these guys overseas. And that would be phenomenal. So, I'm hoping Joe's right. I really, supporting them. And I tell you what, they'll be well caffeinated. That's for sure. We just sent up 14 kilos today to the boys. But, look, at the end of the day, it's not a World Cup where you have a requirement for 33 or 32. It's a case of how do you win games, and coaches and selectors have to manage budgets. That's a very realistic thing. They have to manage, taking 38 guys overseas or all this kind of stuff. I think at the end of the day, we're not the All Blacks, so they can leave out a Hoskins Tutu. We can't. We need to select a broader range, and then Joe needs his eyes on these guys. He knows that he's probably going to have to call on them throughout the year at some point, and it's best that they have some sort of touch point or they have some sort of base knowledge. And so, yeah, look, I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, we're not the All Blacks. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but I think it is curious that 32 is a very light, and we'll get to the All Blacks later on, but that's a very lean squad. There's only 3 specialist locks in there. Look at the Wallabies, there's 5 locks. There's about 3 or 4 number 8s if you include Rob Valentini. So it's interesting in terms of the size, but I think you're right. I think Joe Schmidt probably does want to get an idea, having not worked with this playing group before. He probably wants to really understand who's who in the zoo here, and these 3 weeks does give him a bit of an idea before the TRC. You mentioned before.
Sorry, I was just going to say it definitely does. However, it's really an interesting spot, rugby. Or if you look at NFL, you look at NRL, like there's caps on squad sizes. NFL know that they have their 55, and then come here they've got to have this many contracted. Whereas because rugby, there's no kind of like, yeah, sure, there's World Rugby, but it's a little bit iffy and whatever. We can select 36, because we're funding it ourselves, so it's kind of up to us. It does make it interesting in the sense, like, it's only really World Cup where there's a 33 man, I think it is, where it really puts pressure on coaches. It really puts pressure on selectors, and I think we're coaches are fortunate in the sense that they can kind of build it however they want. They can skin the cat whichever way they would like, and I think that's what you're seeing here. It's just different situations. We'd love to be able to say we've got 32 and 6 guys pressing, but we're in a different spot.
What did you just casting an eye to the Rebels players that made it? I think a lot of people were surprised that Josh Canham didn't, but I can understand why. I think he's probably the cherry on top, I think, in terms of if you've got the fundamentals right, to have someone who's a bit of a baller like Josh Canham, who's can offload, play perhaps a bit wider, maybe a bit looser. That's great to be able to inject once you get the ruck down packed and you're so hard working that you're allowing for the quick ball. But you made mention earlier about the Rebels number 12 there, David Fele-Umi. You might be able to pronounce his last name better than I
think anyone can.
but what do you like about David? Because he's been on the attention of Joe Schmidt for months. He met when Joe, the first side he saw was the Rebels earlier this year. And I was told that he met with David. So he clearly was on his radar for some time. And so it's not necessarily surprising that he's there, despite the fact that for quite a few people, he is someone that they might not know.
Yeah. Like I said, I really thought last year he like, for me, he really stood out. And of course, I'm going to have an eye on the Rebels 12 the year after I leave. You kind of have a look around and see who's there, and I was super impressed by him, particularly because I thought maybe, well, I didn't know anything about him, to be fair, but for me, it's his running game, his aggression. I think what you're seeing from Joe Schmidt is you're seeing him work towards a template. He's going, okay, I want this from these players, and he's selecting towards that. So he wants midfielders who are strong, who are aggressive. You've got your Hunter Paisami, you've got David Filiwai, you've got Lenny Ikitau outside of him, and then I think with a couple of the selections at lock, I think you're seeing what you were mentioning just earlier. You're seeing guys who are good at fundamentals. You're seeing guys who are good at ruck work, who are good in the air, who are good at restarts, who aren't a risk of getting a red card, or not as much of a risk of getting a red card. And I think he's selecting towards that. He's playing the percentages a lot more. Which maybe in Australia we're probably not used to. We're used to a little bit of, trying to have to fight for space on the back page, and we like to select guys. And I think we're seeing a little bit of an antidote to that. So it is really interesting. We're seeing a really conservative, calm, pragmatic approach. And I think that's it's interesting. I guess for me, it's like, how do we get that balance between calm, pragmatic, long term, but also getting the support of Australia on board by winning a few of these early games.
Yeah, not surprised to see the 10s there with Noel Olasio, Ben Donaldson, Tom Liner, Tom re-signing. Recently, we broke that news on Sunday, a contract extension. So he wasn't even off contract in 25, but signed through to 26. That's good. That's good for your planning, your forward thinking.
It's smart business as well from Rugby Australia. They know that he's going to be worth more in a year's time. So let's get him now, particularly when you have Carter Gordon leaving. Tom's unproven at test level, although, I think we all are very excited to see him and think he's got a lot of those attributes. But it's much easier to re-sign him now than maybe in a year's time when he's got 10 or so caps under his belt and he's played well. So yeah, fair play to Rugby Australia.
Yeah, agree with that. Isaac Rodder decided to go. Also broke that news last week and said that he wouldn't be in that side, which proved to be the case. You played Zach at the 2019 World Cup. You know how important second rowers are. Is it a loss for Australian rugby to lose another one? Because there's so many up in the Northern Hemisphere. They're kind of the first sort of people that you go to, tight headlock, second rowers, and then probably your tens.
Yeah, definitely tight headlocks in places like Japan as well, where they're just Rory Arnold on monster contracts, and rightfully so. They're hard to get there. Yeah, it's tough. It's once again it's short term, long term, and I really do like our leadership at Rugby Australia is looking long term. I think maybe we haven't as much done that, but I do think it's a different game in Australia. You have to fight for relevance, so we just need to balance it. Yeah, it sucks that he's going. For us to have the luxury to say we're not going to pick a Will Skelton, a Rory Arnold, a Richie Arnold, a Isaac Rodder, it's backing our processes, it's backing our coaching, it's backing a lot of things in the system that we've got, and fair play to them if they pull it off. I guess with Mike Cron, Laurie Fisher. In the environment, they're saying, "Yep, we feel like we can develop these guys." And look, fair play. Let's give them that crack. They deserve it. And yeah, we're definitely hoping it works out.
Yeah, well, it's given opportunities to guys like Angus Blythe, who I've just written a story about, and he's 26. He's probably a good age profile, 204 centimetres. He's probably flattened you once or twice as well. He looks a bit like Brad Thorne, so hopefully he develops into one.
He's fixed his haircut, which is good. That remember he had that little. Oh my god! I was just glad. I know. I was glad it was spelt right. But yeah, no, good on him. No, I'm excited. I think it's good to have. Some young Aussie locks. It's look, and like I said, Mike Cron, Laurie Fisher, you've got some amazing IP, amazing experience in the environment, and they're backing that. And look, it might be a little bit of short term pay, but let's we're behind them, that's for sure.
Well, that's the big difference as well between this squad and this Wallaby squad compared to the last one, is that the last one was coached dreadfully. I think we can all acknowledge that. You had NRL coaches, AFL coaches in and amongst one or two Wallaby assistants. Now we've actually got a proven international coaching team, and you'll see that on the footy field with tactics, with acumen, with understanding, with leadership. So that's a really pleasing one. Just on the subject of locks as well, we talk about the guys that are leaving this weekend in the French top 14. You're going to have Toulouse, who's got Richie Arnold, and I know that people don't seem to rate him off the back of last year's World Cup, but he's in another final, having just won a European Championship Cup final, and he's up against Bordeaux, who've got Adam Coleman and Kane Douglas. So you think about all the second rowers, where 3 of the 6 that are going to be on the field or on the benches this weekend are Australian in the biggest competition and the best competition in the world at the moment. So it says a lot about the talent being there. We don't necessarily have the money to keep that talent on Australian shores. So, yeah, lots to ponder.
I don't think we allocate a lot of money towards locks as well in Australia. Like I said, we are fighting for space on the back page, and it is your fly halves, your wingers who kind of command that kind of money. It's unfortunately, sometimes your locks go away, but particularly in France and definitely Japan, these guys are premium. They understand what they mean to the set piece, and they pay for it. So I think it's just where we're at. Like I said, I'm sure we can develop some more.
So I'm just going to finish the Wallabies squad news by saying that the player I'm most excited about, Charlie Cahill. I reckon we'll see him in that Wallabies match day 23 as well. So good luck to him. Is there a play in there that did leap out and you're thrilled about as well?
Look, Charlie Cahill, definitely. I've spoken about him a lot. I think he provides a lot of versatility. I think he's a guy worth investing in. I think, like I said, it potentially allows us to do a 6-2 bench. I think we saw England on the weekend finally use, was it a Ben Earl at centre? And yeah, I think that part of the game is starting to move a little bit, and I think Charlie Cowell gives us that flexibility, which is really good. And then yeah, obviously David Fillaway, I think really excited to see him. He might not get a go early on. Hunter Paisami's had one of his strongest years, but look, he's gonna learn through osmosis, that's for sure. Just being around these guys and growing in stature, I'm sure, and that often brings a lot of confidence to young guys, and you see them just start thriving the year later. So I'm sure he's going to benefit from this experience.
Yeah, nice deserved call-ups. Guys that you like that have put in hard yards get rewarded, and they're guys like Josh Fluke and Hamish Stewart as well, Ryan Smith, of course. So fair play to that contingent of players. Hey, look, Super Rugby final, it was pretty one-sided, wasn't it? It was 41-10 to the Blues. I don't think it was too surprising. I was backing the Blues. I thought that they would win. Home soil. I just love their forward pack, and not many sides go to Eden Park and win. I think they've really only been knocked off once in the last couple of years there, and that's been the Crusaders have been too good at times. Did you watch the final? Did you like the final? What did you think?
Yeah, look, I think I was deep down. I wanted the Chiefs to win. Why, I have no idea. But I think there are a few things going against them. One, they've had two massive performances. I really feel that last week emotionally would have been a huge performance, and would have taken a big toll. The Blues at home, it was raining. The Chiefs had their own injury concerns. They probably needed everything to be, or every man on deck, just to give it a good shot. And I think we saw. Yeah, we saw if it's raining, you're a bit fatigued mentally and physically, and you're going up to Eden Park. It's a very, very tough ask. So look, well deserved. Bigger than a World Cup final apparently. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, well, probably nice to say that. You've been to a World Cup final, and you've also played in a Super Rugby final. Unfortunately, you don't have the silverware to show it. Sorry to reminding you there.
No, I've got plenty of silver. That's the issue.
Caleb Clark, he's a freak, hat-trick. No surprises there that he was in the All Blacks squad. Probably the one surprise, I reckon, and maybe it's not because he's such a talented rising star. We saw that in the semi-final, but Wallace gets picked ahead of Hoskins Sotutu. Did it surprise you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I've seen a few pieces done on the stats. Meters in contact, carries, penalties against, all this kind of stuff. I just think if you're Hoskins Sotutu, you're pretty dirty, aren't you? Like, sure, meters in contact, all that stuff, but 12 tries or whatever he got. Like, other people aren't scoring these tries. Like, I just, there's a reason he keeps turning up. He can sniff them out, and I think you'd be pretty dirty. Good God, I think you'd be very dirty. And I don't know. It's look, what a luxury to have. I'm not going to start questioning Razor Robinson's credentials. I think he can pick it, but I'm sure he knows what he wants. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets called up quickly as well. As you said, there's only 3 locks in that squad. Potentially got a couple guys who can, double from back row into there. But once again, selected a couple unballers, which maybe he was very much up against Satiti, and Adi Savea, and he was ultimately, third out of those guys. So yeah, look, what a luxury to have. What
a luxury. And yeah, it's probably an embarrassment of riches when you're leaving out guys like Quinta Paya, Nana Satoro, Peter Lakai, who was just superb for the Hurricanes this year. Probably the one selection that surprised me, George Pell, because I thought his throwing was dreadful throughout the year, and maybe that's something that they think they'll be able to fix really quickly. His quality, obviously, in the loose play. The biggest bolter for them, Tossie, the tight head prop for the Hurricanes, but awesome story. He picked up the phone. He had his kids around. The big tight head.
Former back rower.
Former back row.
Former back row moved in. Yeah, it is a cool story, isn't it? Yeah, it's
he was wearing his jocks when he picked up the call, and
wasn't FaceTime, was it? Good God.
I hope it was, but Razor. But more than 140 kilos. I know Jamie Moore, who did a predicted squad. I don't think he had him in that predicted squad, but he kind of said that he might be the heaviest All Black of all time. You wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. Massive unit. The other uncapped players, Billy Proctor, Cortez Ratimer, and of course, we've mentioned Satiti as well. Scott Barrett, the captain. No arguments there. I know some people, including Lima Sopawanga, have questioned, should it be Artie Sevilla? Maybe. I think he would have been great, but you can understand why Barrett is the skipper as well.
Yeah, I think the All Blacks have stuck with the tradition of picking a very boring person as a captain. He's my favorite to get interviewed. He is so straight down the line, and you're going to get predictable, hard, tough man. And I mean that obviously sarcastically. Artie Savea, what a servant, and he's amazing for our game internationally. And I dare say that they're just after someone who's playing locally. He's obviously got that link with Razor at the Crusaders. They'll have a good working relationship there. But look, a guy like Artie Sevilla is going to be a leader in any team. So I'm sure that'll get moved on pretty quickly.
I do agree with you, and I think you actually made some valid points there. Hamish Bidwell, who's a columnist, he's worked for decades in New Zealand as a journo. He kind of did ask, though, the question, like New Zealand rugby, and I think it's actually probably valid that they try to say that they're all about diversity, but there's actually not that much diversity in leadership positions across the board, in both in management and in captaincies. Like, you've got to go back to Tana Umaga, the last All Black captain with Polynesian background, long term, that is. So Artie Sevilla, like, we know that he leads from the front with the Hurricanes, has done. He's coming back to New Zealand rugby. I think it would have been a bold selection, a surprising selection had he gone down that route. But I do agree with you that Scott Barrett probably will just be head down, bum up. You don't get too much out of him, and maybe that's what they want.
Yeah, look, it's interesting though. I think we're seeing a real shift globally in a lot of ways in terms of promoting the game. Access. If you look at the Amazon Prime documentary they did on the All Blacks maybe 5 years ago, it was the most boring documentary. The All Blacks didn't allow any access. It was very protected. It was very, straight down the line. And then you compare that to Manchester City, to the Amazon, the cricket, the Test, our Aussie cricket team, the coverage and the access that they were given, it was so transparent, and it allowed fans to kind of live along with that. And you're seeing now with, I think it's Silver Lake investing in New Zealand Rugby Union, and they've got a like an All Blacks TV type thing where it is very transparent and open, and you're seeing even the Kiwis realize that we've got to promote, we've got to provide a little bit different, and I think Artie would have been perfect for that. He would have been absolutely perfect for that. He is very active on social media. He's very he's a great character. He speaks well. He's motivational. He's funny. He's very much this new breed of player. Whereas I think, particularly when I started, it was the same thing. It was all, and you wouldn't give anything to media. You'd pretend like it was, they were the enemy and all this kind of stuff. Whereas I think now there's a understanding that then it's a bit of a cooperating relationship in that. So yeah, look, I think we're reading into it probably more than we need to, in the sense, but I do find it very interesting. I think Kiwis have always been very protective of their IP. Like I said, you've seen this investment from Silver Lake, and it has resulted in more of this. And even a guy like Razor Robinson, doing a lot more media, or having hidden cameras and all that. It's interesting. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. I think Artie would have been an exciting choice, but Scott Barrett probably maybe the sensible one.
I think you're probably right. Okay, last point of subject really this week. We're going to turn to the north, Leicester. They've decided, mutual a mutual decision between Dan McKellar and Leicester to separate, but this comes at extraordinary timing that over the weekend, just about a week and a half after Leicester announced their coaching structure with Peter Hewitt, the Australian who's been up at Rico previously with Dan McKellar at the Brumbies as well, was on his way, heading via Dubai. The news kind of comes down. Blimey, you wouldn't want to be Peter Hewitt, who's just arrived in England and found out that his coach is no longer there, having just left his job. There's other Australians like Dan Palmer at Leicester as well. The question is, and you previously played for Leicester, so it's about 7 coaches in as many years. There's been a merry-go-round of coaches outside of probably Richard Cockerell, who's spent a long time there, but more pressingly and pertinently, probably from an Australian rugby perspective, is with the Waratahs head coaching position up for grabs. Ahead of performance expected imminently, either Nick Stiles, but probably more likely Simon Rawalui to take over. Does Dan McKellar perhaps slip straight into that Waratahs head coaching role? It's perhaps the timing that maybe there's more that meets the eye there.
Yeah, look, from what I understand, I don't know if Dan was if it was his decision. Yeah, it is so odd. And look, Leicester, I was there for a few years, about 3 years. There's about 4 coaches. I think I got there on a Thursday. By Tuesday, they had a new defense coach, Scott Hansen. He got fired. As I said, I had 1 session with him. He was fired by the Monday. He's now at the All Blacks. As attack coach, he was defense coach there. Like it's very much a football, a soccer kind of mentality at Tigers, and it's quite it's quite brutal. There's a lot of pressure there. I'm still a part of like Facebook groups and fan groups for Leicester Tigers, and I can tell you a lot of people are pretty shocked. I think everyone understood that Dan's first year maybe didn't go to plan, but everyone understands that, he's finally got his squad together. He's got his staff together, more importantly. Let's ride this out. And so, yeah, it would be interesting. I dare say there'll be a bit of news to come soon about that. But, it's very odd. Peter Hewitt, I spoke to him only a few months ago. He was looking forward to heading up north with his family, the kids in school, and then gosh, to land in Dubai and then find out, like, does he have a job? What do they do? He's just, it's just a kerfuffle, isn't it? It's very odd, very, very odd.
It's the timing. I think the players are due back on July 1. So, do you think the players would have got a sense? They finished 8th in the standings. Not ideal, but there was a lot of disruptions without having an attack coach there last year. World Cup players missing for the first chunk. Dan McKellar probably understanding that, or learning on the run, but finding out brutally that the English Premiership's not the Super Rugby sprint. It's actually a marathon, and you've kind of got a time. You can't always be perhaps intense like you might usually be. Do you think McKellar would have had an idea from what the players would have been saying in the feedback given?
Look, I think if that was the case, the case, why wasn't he let go 2 months ago or a month? I find it very odd that it was, well, not too much. Well, why was it kind of after the coaches were announced, and maybe it was to get them on board? Maybe the board have gone, look, we need to shore these guys up so they can't go anywhere. Then we'll get rid of Dan. Like, it just, it's a different game up there. Like, it really is. It's very brutal. It's, in soccer, in football up there, it's much easier to fire one coach than get a new staff, because players at that level are paid a lot more than the head coach, and so they move them on really quickly. And unfortunately, that kind of culture is lingering a little bit at Tigers. So Oh yeah, I don't really know what to feel about it, to be honest. I'm disappointed for someone like Dan. I thought he was an amazing fit. Yeah, it's just the modern game. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, I thought he would have been able to develop. He learned a lot from his first year in charge of the Brumbies when they struggled, but he was implementing change. And then in 2019, in his second year, they go to the semi-finals. They ultimately lose to the Jaguares and Buenos Aires, but you could see that the foundations are in place, the tight five, and that's all things that English rugby, Tigers rugby is all about. Do you think the Waratahs would be a good fit for him? My understanding is that he'd be certainly interested in it, and he's a coach. He's got to be able to coach, and his family's probably going to be happier in Australia than they will be in the Midlands in England.
Yeah, you'd be stupid not to if you're the Waratahs. Look, you would know more than me in terms of who was interested in that job, but he goes right to the top of that pile. If I'm Waratahs decision makers, obviously, as you said, they're appointing a GM or a head of performance first. Dan McKellar has to be in that conversation, and then look, it becomes the right fit between what's his working relationship with, say, a GM, whether it's a Simon or a Nick, and do they get along? Are the roles separated right that Dan can feel comfortable in his role? And so there's a bit to go on there. But look, I think with Dan in the same room as a Simon or a Nick, you'd think that they'd find a solution. You just get smart people in a room and you think that they'd find a solution. So I think that would be, it's definitely, you'd be silly not to think about it, whether or not it happens. There's a lot to play with it, but I dare say there's a spot there for him. And then, he does well in that job. You start thinking of him for Wallabies like we've thought for a little while now anyway.
Yeah, he's a good insurance policy. If Joe Schmidt decides he doesn't want to stay around post Lions, to have someone like a Dan McKellar back into the Australian ecosystem, I think would be a good idea. I think the other thing, when he came to the Brumbies, or he was there for a long time, you would have been coached by him. But then when he took over as head coach, you'd already left by that point in time. But he ensured that the tight five was strong. Managed to bring back Nick Frost, managed to ensure that he didn't go to Panasonic with Robbie Deans' side, that to stay on soil, got Caden Neville to the Brumbies, lured guys like Darcy Swain, Lanny Katau down. The tight five was a real area of focus. And you think about what the Waratahs have needed for the last 5 to 10 years, and it's the tight five. And since Michael Checker left, piece by piece, they've all gone, and they need to put those pieces of the puzzle back together. I think he'd be the ideal person. And you even try to lure a Scott Wisemantle there as well. And if you can, even better, because he's the sort of pedigree that you need alongside of McKellar to be able to help. Obviously, it's kind of cost a bit, but I don't care. It's the Waratahs. You need them to be strong. They've been failures for far too long, and they needed to show some leadership, I think, Rugby Australia and New South Wales here, and ensure that side gets back humming like what the Blues have been able to do, the transformation of the Blues under Vern Cotter, who's come in there off the back of leadership of Andrew Hall, the former Waratahs CEO. They've transformed that quickly, and they need to do the same at the Tars now. Very similar cities, similar populations. They've got to be strong, I think.
Yeah, it's a really, really good analogy that you make, and similar records, underperforming. The strongest unions, the strongest kind of juniors, the most people, the most money, but constantly underperforming. And once again, look, if you get a Simon, a Scott Wisemantle, Simon or a Nick, Scott Wisemantle, Dan McKellar in a room, they'll probably find a way. And I dare say with Rugby Australia pulling the strings now, they'll understand that. They'll understand how important New South Wales rugby is to our bigger game. That if we're successful there, things kind of flow on. And I think it'll be pretty interesting to see where they go. I'm sure other clubs will be a little bit furious about the bias that's that a lot of people feel that is shown towards the Waratahs. But look, that being said, we need a strong Waratahs. As much as I hate saying that, we do need a strong Waratahs. It's good for Australian rugby.
Well, they need to settle this really quickly. And I see your point there. There's things like the salary cap for next year. Where do the Rebels players, how do they get squeezed in financially? Because at the moment, it's RA's wanting 50-50 with
Are
those that
we?
head.
What
So
are we?
that's a
What are we doing with salary cap? Like, we're just putting up speed bumps, on the freeway for no. We can't select overseas. No, you can't have, like, surely we're adjusting. Like, that I don't know how in stone these salary caps were anyway, and sure they work at an NRL level when you've got 12 teams, you've got different revenues for clubs and whatever. But I just feel like, who do we think we are to be putting up these artificial roadblocks, when the game, we are not in that. We don't have that luxury. We just don't have that luxury.
Not including the Rugby Australia top-ups, 5.5 million is what you're expected to, and you're supposed to spend about 90 to 95% of that as well. But guys like Lukan Salakai-Loto didn't come back on an RA contract on massive money. Fair play, but the Reds can't afford to squeeze him in without the assistance of RA. He wants to go back to the Reds. I think RA wants him to go to the Tars. It'll be fascinating to see where that one lands. There's other players in that situation. Rob Leota, he's got an investment property in Queensland, probably wants to go back there, a bit of family. There's reasons for these guys to want to go to a certain place. And when they were previously told that they can basically pick, and now things have been changed.
I'll tell you what they're going to do is they're going to go overseas. Like, they're not going to go to the Waratahs. We want to go to the Reds. No, you can't get the money that you want from the Reds. Okay, I'm going to go overseas and earn more. Like, it's like, once again, I get this whole rules, but the goalposts have shifted. We've lost a team. We've been kicked out of a World Cup. We need some world-class problem solving going on here. And I think putting up artificial barriers to entry in a way, because it's meant to even up the pool. Like, we don't have that luxury, guys. Like, we just don't. We are losing players. We are bleeding, and we need to shore that up. And I think some leadership really needs to be shown, because we just have to keep these guys on our shores, to strengthen our team. Or if we let them go overseas, well, then you got to select them. Because I don't know what vision we've got here at the moment. It's very confusing.
It's a strong way to wrap up the pod, but I completely echo and agree, and there's some seriously valid points. Matt,
it'll be my face with the meme on it saying it, though. It won't be yours, will it? I'll be getting all the heat.
Someone's got to, mate. Someone's got to. Look,
love it.
Next week it's going to be test week. Always an exciting time. Oof. Thanks for your time. You have a good week. Sorry it's a day late, the pod, but I'm looking forward to your responses. Please sing out what you're liking and want more of. Until next time, that's all on the Raw Rugby Podcast.